Our topic today is summer care in the rabbitry. Now, I would say arguably, and actually kind of hands down, I would say that summer care is more important for rabbits than winter care. And the reason being that rabbits actually take cold and winter really well, especially if you're breeding and selecting for your conditions, your setup, your area, your climate. You will find rabbits that will adjust and acclimate and typically will not have too many issues in the winter. Summer, on the other hand, these are fur-bearing animals and they don't sweat, so they don't tend to take heat well. The only way that a rabbit can really cool itself is actually through its ears. So, it doesn't give it a lot of ways to shed heat. So, two most important things to pay attention to in the rabbitry in the summer are shade and water. So back here in my barn, they're out of the sun. There's no direct sun on the animals. This is kind of the luck of my setup and my property. But, depending on your own setup, you can do the same thing. Even if you're outside, pick your spot where your animals are going to be housed, pick it out under trees where they're going to have summer shade. Now, maybe that's not as shaded in the winter because once the trees lose their leaves, they won't be in as much shade, but that would be okay too because, in the winter, they'll appreciate a little bit more warmth and sunlight. But rabbits should always have a way to be out of direct sunlight all year long. So even if they're outside, it can be something as simple as plywood over the top of the cages that keeps the rain, the wind off of them and gives them the opportunity for shade. The other most important thing is water. I'm out here, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I have already fed and watered this morning. Come in and do a quick check on them and just make sure everyone has water. Cool water is best. So I'll come in and top this off. You could add some ice cubes to the water in the middle of the day. We are actually in the middle of a heat wave here, which is kind of unusual for us. I mean, we have heat waves, but I'm in the Northeast in the US. I'm not down south, so several days of above 90 degrees is not uncommon, but it's not something that we deal with all summer long. So my rabbits aren't used to dealing with that all summer long. So I do come in, give them a little extra care and attention. Mostly, again, it's the water, it's the sun, making sure that's off of them. Do everything that I can to keep the flies under control. That's been tough this week. You can see that I'm really going gangbusters with the tapes, cleaning out, doing what we can into every rabbitry. Some flies will fly, I guess. So, you do what you can, you keep up with it, try to keep it under control. And again, like we talked about in the other fly control video, keep up and try and break that life cycle so that they don't get so out of hand that they're a real problem. Some people do different things. I generally do not, because for one, my kind of mantra with or whole policy with my rabbit keeping is to raise rabbits that can withstand the conditions both in the winter and in the summer for my location and my setup. So I select for that in the breeding and what animals I keep to breed and pass on their genetics. And so that means, having animals that can take the summer. So I find that in so doing, in combination with my setup and care and making sure they're cared for with water, that I don't have to go to a lot of extraneous lengths like frozen water bottles and things like that. But those are options. And certainly if this heat wave were to go on many more days, or if it were not cooling off at night, it is cooling off at night here down into like the upper 50s, lower 60s. We're lucky that we're at least getting that. So these animals are getting a break. But if they were, staying 70 or 80 degrees at night, then I might consider doing something like that too. And there's several different ways. In the article on meetrabbits.org, we talk about more of them. But some of the things people do are keep ceramic tiles and refrigerate or freeze them so they're nice and cool. Bring them out. Obviously, they won't stay cold all day long, but they will give the animals a break. Frozen water bottles are one. Chunks of ice cubes in the water, which is a nice way to refresh and replenish in the afternoon and cool that water back down so that it's something that's more palatable for the rabbits. That's a great idea too. Or frozen treats, judiciously with the frozen treats, because if your animals are not used to fresh foods or berries and things like that, you don't want to just go throwing that at them just because it's hot outside, and especially not in a time of stress, which high heat is a time of stress. One other thing I want to mention, now I was lucky enough to know, and usually with today's reporting we have some idea, not that they always get it right, but I did know this heat wave was coming on. We actually didn't have a lot of forewarning, but I did know a few days ahead of time, and I did have some does that I wanted to breed back. So I made sure I did that this weekend before the heat hit, because if you get 3 or more consecutive days of 95 or above, and maybe even 90 or above, your bucks can actually go sterile. They won't go sterile permanently, but it could be months before they get back up to a good reproductive stage. If that does happen, the best way to overcome it is actually to kind of clean the pipes, to have them breeding the does and get things working and moving again. But because I knew this was coming and it was close to time to rebreed, I went ahead and I bred the does that I wanted bred. This Aster in particular, because she's been putting on some weight and I don't want her going too long unbred. So I made sure that she got bred this weekend. So that is another thing to think about. If you know that there's heat coming on, maybe get those animals bred. I do not expect that we'll be in too much of a stressful situation when she kindles. Again, our summers don't usually stay this hot. They will stay typically in the 80s, but I've had no problems with the does kindling at those temperatures in my setup. There's a few other things I could do. I found a great link to a solar fan that was shared on one of the forums the other day, so that might be something. But we get good breeze and airflow through these windows. These windows stay completely out all summer long. Towards this time of day, one thing I do is come out here and I do shut this door. I like it open because I get great airflow and everybody gets good air. But right now, this cage is just a little too close to it, and the sun is moving, and as it moves through the afternoon toward the west, direct sun will come on here, and that will actually make it really hot for those on this end. So, I'll come in, just shut the door. Not that hard to do, but these are the little things that you want to look for and think of. You can see here that most of these don't have much hay in the rack, and the reason for that is that you'll often find that when it's hot like this, the rabbits aren't eating as much. I mean, we can relate, right? How many of us are really wanting to pack on a heavy meal when it's 90 degrees for days on end? So these are grow outs, and if they're going to pick and choose a food and not eat, I'd rather have them eating the pellets. So sometimes I just don't give them the option of the hay. That's a judgment call. There's a lot of different opinions on whether to feed hay with your pellets or not. I like it. I've got a good source. I find that it keeps their guts moving, keeps everybody cleaned out. They do well. And, so I will continue to do it. I'm not concerned if it takes an extra week for my grow outs to grow out because they had hay, because I'll tell you that the cost savings to me over the pellets is well worth it. And the health of the animals is well worth it. But again, today we're talking summer care, and that is one thing that I sometimes do. Again, it's a judgment call. I pick and choose. I wouldn't say it's a hard and fast rule, but on some of these hot days, I may skip the hay for a day or so, and just kind of force them to eat the pellet so that I know they're getting that higher protein and more balanced meal. And so I think that covers most of what we've got on summer care for rabbits. Again, your big thing is give them shade and give them water and keep at it. And if you do that, and if you're selectively breeding and keeping animals that can tolerate your conditions, maybe you need to look into, if you're down south, like a breed like a Temuk that has the larger ears, are better at shedding heat. These are all things that we all need to consider. But again, come on over to meetrabbits.org. See what else we've got to talk about in the article, and any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them.